Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and give you a shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a concept that is, well, absolutely fundamental to countless transactions, especially in the world of Islamic finance. Qabd, which means possession. We're going to navigate Shari'ah standard number 18 on possession. That's our main source for this dive. And this standard meticulously breaks down what Qabd means, how you actually achieve it in different situations, who ends up paying the costs involved, and maybe most surprisingly, its incredibly relevant modern uses. Our mission today is really to get past just a simple dictionary definition. We want to explore the intricate layers here. By the end, you should understand not just what Qabd is, but really why these distinctions are so critical for whether a transaction is valid and what its effects are. Hopefully, you'll have some real aha moments.
Yeah, what's truly compelling about Qabd, I think, is how timeless it feels. It's this foundational idea, but it shows remarkable adaptability. It moves, pretty seamlessly from very traditional dealings right into the complexities of today's financial instruments. We'll uncover not just the mechanics of possession, but sort of the deeper reasoning behind why these specific rules exist.
Okay, so to really grasp its depth, we need a solid foundation. Let's start right at the beginning. How does our source actually define Qabd? It's described as the possession of something, or what is considered as such according to custom. Now that phrase, according to custom, elf in the originalist, that seems really key, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That phrase, according to custom, immediately flags a crucial point. Qabd isn't some rigid, one-size-fits-all rule. How people understand possession, how it's actually achieved, often really depends on the common practices of a particular time and place. This flexibility lets the standard stay relevant even as business practices change. But it does raise an important question. How exactly is custom figured out, legally speaking? Especially if you have practices that seem to conflict.
That's a great point. Does that mean ORF can actually, change a fundamental principle? Or does it just operate within certain boundaries?
It definitely operates within boundaries. Custom can clarify how possession happens, maybe the specific steps, but it can't just get rid of the basic need for possession itself. The standard aims to give clarity on Qabd, but specifically within contracts, defining what can legally stand in for physical possession, how it works for real estate versus movable goods, or even things just described in a debt agreement. And importantly, it clarifies who foots the bill for the costs involved.
And it's just as important to know what the standard doesn't cover, right?
Yeah.
That tells us a lot about its focus.
Exactly. It deliberately sidesteps possession outside of contracts, like, say, if you just find something on the street. It also doesn't get into the weeds of the possessor's specific legal liability. Are they guaranteeing it or not? Or possession related to offsetting debts, usoi. This focus really underlines the standard's main job, clarifying possession strictly within the framework of contractual promises, making sure transactions are clear and, well, less ambiguous.
Okay, so if you thought possession was simple, maybe think again. Because Qabd isn't just one thing. There are different ways it's considered achieved. This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Precisely. We need to distinguish between real possession, key ifasi, and constructive possession. Cool, understanding this difference. Absolutely key for modern transactions.
Let's make that concrete. So, for real possession of, say, real estate, it's not just about getting the keys. That part's called takliya, them vacating. It's also about them giving you full, unrestricted power, tamkin al-tasarruf, to do basically anything you want with that property. Yeah. Think of it like truly being in command, not just, standing on the land. For movable goods, though, it's much simpler. It's al-taslim al-hissi, actual physical delivery, literally handing something over. But then we get constructive possession, and this is where Qabd really shows its adaptability, I feel. This is vital for things like specific items you've agreed on, or maybe items described in a debt once they've been clearly marked out. Here, the core idea is that the person receiving it has been given full control and access to the item, even if they haven't physically shifted it yet.
Right. It's like the item has been virtually vacated by the seller and made totally available to the buyer. And the standard gives some really good practical examples for constructive possession. For instance, the registration of a mortgage. Whether it's for property or other assets, if it's in a legally recognized register, that act of registration itself. That counts. It signifies control, so it's possession. Another example, possessing bonds or securities issued in your name or endorsed over to you. Those documents represent the actual assets, right? They give you the power to sell them or transfer them. And interestingly, if you already had possession of something beforehand, maybe under a different arrangement, that prior possession can actually count as the new possession for a subsequent transaction if there's a valid legal reason for ownership to transfer.
That makes a lot of sense, especially now when so much value is tied up in digital records or intangible things rather than physical objects. And then there's that very specific type, reciprocal possessions case. You mentioned it's crucial for currency exchange.
Yes, absolutely essential there. This demands immediate, literal, hand-to-hand delivery and receipt el cato right there during the contract session itself. No delays allowed, which, makes perfect sense given how quickly currency values can shift.
Okay, let's pivot from the theory to the practical stuff. Costs. Every transaction involves some expense. So once Qabd happens, who actually pays for what?
Well, these rules about who pays, they might seem a bit mundane, but they're actually really important for avoiding arguments and ensuring things are fair. That's huge in a system that values trust and ethical dealing. So in financial exchange contracts, the standard lays out pretty clear default rules. Though remember, custom or a specific agreement can always change things. Typically, the seller covers the costs of actually delivering the item sold. Like if the item isn't present, the cost of getting it to the buyer. They also usually cover costs like measuring or weighing, if that's needed to fulfill the contract. The buyer, on the other hand, is generally responsible for the costs of delivering the payment, the price.
Okay, what about things like drawing up deeds, legal documents, registration fees? How are those normally handled?
For those costs, writing deeds, documents, registration fees, the first port of call is always what the parties agreed. If they didn't agree on anything specific, then you look to local custom, and there's an important detail. If the buyer specifically says, look, I want this delivered to place X, and you, the seller, have to cover the cost, then the seller has to comply. These general rules apply across all financial exchange contracts unless, again, there's a specific custom or a condition in the contract saying otherwise.
And what about other common types of contracts, like loans or maybe storing something for someone?
Good question. In loan contracts, it's the borrower who's responsible for the costs of delivery and fulfillment, especially costs related to measuring out the quantity borrowed. The borrower also typically bears the costs of writing up any necessary deeds or documents related to the loan. And for deposits, which you see where you're basically asking someone to safeguard your item, the costs fall on the depositor, which is logical, right? You're paying for the safekeeping of your own property.
It's really quite striking how these traditional principles hold up so well, how they just naturally extend into our modern financial world, especially that idea of constructive possession.
Absolutely. And the standard gives some really clear contemporary examples of what counts as constructive possession today. Think about a bank check or even a personal check that the bank guarantees for payment. That's considered Qabd. Crucially, it counts even if you haven't physically collected the cash yet. The fact that you can get the funds through the banking system, that establishes your control. That's possession. Payment by credit card, another perfect example. That transaction, going through the card system, it's treated as a form of Qabd. Even though no physical cash changes hands right then and there, the funds are essentially marked for you, accessible.
Right, the control's there.
Exactly. Or think about when someone deposits money directly into a creditor's bank account, maybe because the creditor asked them to or agreed to it. As soon as that money hits the creditor's account, they're considered to be in possession. Doesn't matter if they've physically withdrawn it yet, they have control over those funds.
These examples really do highlight just how adaptable Qabd is, how kind of forward-thinking the concept is, showing an ancient principle governing really sophisticated modern financial tools and practices. It's definitely not just some historical footnote. It's a living, breathing part of how finance works today.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Qabd, it's clear this isn't just some abstract idea. We've looked at its core definition, the different forms real, constructive, reciprocal, and got into the practical side, who pays for what. We've also seen how this concept isn't stuck in old texts, but is very much alive and kicking in modern transactions.
Yeah, this dive really shows, I think, the clarity and the adaptability of these Shari'ah standards. They offer a pretty robust way to understand complex financial dealings. It highlights how these principles aim for fairness and clarity in business, emphasizing the real-world consequences for everyone involved, trying to ensure certainty. So what's the takeaway for you listening? Well, next time you buy something, maybe swipe a credit card, or even just register something online, you can appreciate this underlying concept of Qabd working behind the scenes. It really is everywhere once you start looking.
And this brings up, I think, an interesting point to ponder. How do you think that principle of custom, the IRF, will keep evolving? How will it shape our understanding of possession as we go deeper into a digital economy, where physical exchange gets rarer and everything is just data streams? That's definitely something to think about on your own.